A true story. Can anyone explain this? I have a very good friend, a rational man, a solicitor, and his wife is a nurse. He has no interest in UFOs, aliens, or anything that would be considered out of the norm. Approximately 6 months ago, he was on his way to work, just outside Cardiff in Wales. His wife was with him and he was dropping her off at the health hospital in Cardiff. They were driving eastbound on the M4 motorway, chatting when they both saw above them, in his words, a bright disc-type object that seemed to be keeping pace with their car approximately 70 miles per hour. They watched the object for about 2 minutes, when, in his words, shot off at an incredible speed. He said it practically disappeared. My friend slowed right down and looked at his wife, then... And this is the creepy bit. A voice from the back of the car said, "Hello, how are you?" And that was that. This is 100% true. His wife was so upset that she could not go to work, and when I talked to him about it, he says he didn't know what to make of it. And although he accepted that there are things we don't know about this world, his wife had been affected. She comes from a religious family and they won't discuss it at all. As I said, I don't know what to make of it. Do they have a sense of humor? Who knows, and why them? I and they are baffled. Anyone else heard of something like this? Multiple generations, dreams, or abductions. When I was about 16, I was laying in bed one night. I might have fallen asleep, but I remember a bright blue-white light coming from my window. It was so bright I had to squint and I felt paralyzed with anxiety. The next thing I remember is being in a room, naked and on a cold metal table with multiple short beings looking me over. Their skin was cold to the touch, and they said short little sounds to each other. I do recall some pain, but I visualize a murky light with it, so they may have sedated me. I can tell these beings only see me as science. There is nothing personable about them. They leave the room and I am left standing naked in the middle of the room for about an hour. Another type of being enters the room. They are blonde and athletic, wearing similar clothing to Roman robes, but a much better quality of materials that has thin strands of precious metals woven into it. They speak to me telepathically and tell me they are sorry for my discomfort, but the medical tests are necessary to verify that I am who they are looking for. I have no recollection of what they said next or even how long it took. I know that I was given a history, but I don't know what it is anymore. The tall man in the middle motions to one of the other men next to him and presents me with a white dress in Roman style. It is delicate and made of the same material as theirs, but much more elaborate. Taking the dress meant staying, so I declined and woke up in my bed. The next morning, I was weirded out and jokingly told my mom about the dream, thinking she would laugh it off. Instead, she turned pale and told me that a few days after she had gave birth to me, she had something similar happen. She was presented scrolls instead of a dress and was also given the option to stay. Neither of us felt any fear with them, just comfort and acceptance. About a year after that, my grandmother, my mom's mom, was visiting and our dreams came up. My grandmother shocked us by telling us that large aliens found her in the woods, took her, and conducted medical experiments on her. Side note, all three of us have psychic dreams, fibromyalgia, and migraines. I guess I'm curious if mine was a dream? Hello there. I'm new here and I wanted to share my first experience I had about a year ago or so. I'm trying not to share it with my friends or family since it's a touchy subject and I don't want them to think I'm a freak or something. So it was about a year ago or maybe 2, I don't clearly remember. I met a white-gray alien. At first I thought it was a dream, but multiple mediums and experienced people in those things say that alien contacts might happen in what looks like a dream, but isn't one actually. I remember that I wasn't looking in his eyes. I was even avoiding any eye contact with him. I was looking down. I could only see his chest and his arms. I felt a bit intimidated, but not scared. Probably shy since I've been a victim of intimidation when I was younger, and now when I meet people, I don't know, I'm kind of intimidated by looking at them. Plus, I am a shy person. And I think he noticed it. Though he was not menacing, he was calm and pacific, but he was very patient, and that's what I felt. I didn't feel any hostility or hate during the time we chatted. I remember him talking about their technologies, especially their spacecrafts. don't remember why he was sharing the infos though. I don't remember everything. Even if I was avoiding looking at him, I saw him pretty much similar to gray aliens, except he was white and had irises, which were silver or white. My mom think that it was a gray alien trying to pass off as a white gray alien. I remember white grays are a Pacific race and don't want to harm us. I've never felt menace with him. I didn't feel like my life was in danger, and when I woke up I was really calm. I wasn't stressed or anything concerning that encounter. Sadly, I've never talked to him again. I've had flashes, but that's all. I've been wondering what this meant for months. Was this a gray trying to pass as a white and trying to gain my trust? Is he a real white gray trying to tell me something? I don't know, and that's why I asked you guys for opinions. Do you have any idea what it could be? I will share with you a childhood experience which makes me scared when I think of it. I was 8 years old when that happened. I was sleeping on my bed and when I heard a voice. When I woke up, I saw 2 green mechanic human-like creatures. I ran, I screamed, and I ran to my parents' room. I quickly entered to the bed and I woke my parents up. They were even more scared than I was. They asked me what happened and I didn't have anything logical to say. I just said, I saw aliens. After that night, I began to have nightmares. They were so often that they became to make me sleepy during the day. After a month, the nightmares stopped. I began to think about it. I was curious if I saw a nightmare about the green creatures. When I was 17 years old and when I completely forgot that event, I saw the things that I saw when I was 8 again at night. I was curious, but I didn't dare watch them and escape from the house. I found the chance to escape because they were on the balcony of the house. Now I'm 24 and I'm constantly searching and finding new documents about aliens and supernatural beings. Aliens have always frightened me since childhood, and that's when I started having my reoccurring dream, starting in the place the dream usually occurs. I can honestly say that I know something was going on. It started happening when I was about 6. I was living in Highland Road in Convernty with my mom. It was a 2-bedroomed house. My room, if you stood in the doorway, had a bunked bed directly to the right, a chest of drawers and a boiler cupboard on the left, and my window directly in front. I woke up needing to see my mom, not knowing why. I climbed down my stairs from the bed and opened the door to find a tall gray in the hallway stood outside my mom's room, almost like a guard. He looks at me and I can tell something is happening to my mom, so he picks me up and carries me back to bed. I at the time felt no fear, like he is kind to me. He puts me back on the bed and without talking to me tells me that when time comes, I will know. He then leaves and goes back to where he was and I wake up. I remember every detail, everything about where I lived, how I felt in each moment. I've discussed this with my mother and she admits that she believes that she has been visited and once apparently has been on a ship and saw me there. I now have this memory as a dream, or if it was originally a dream. I'm not sure what to think, but since I got my cat, the dreams don't happen as often. Any suggestions as to what may be happening? On my first reptilian encounter, I was having trouble sleeping. I was tossing and turning. I could feel this strange energy in the room, almost like static or something. I turned to the side of the bed and opened my eyes. I saw these hips and legs standing next to my bed. I thought initially it was my boyfriend. I remember wondering, why is Philip just standing there silently watching me? What a weirdo. I sat up very calmly and took a better look. I could see him as clear as day. He wasn't transparent or anything. He was very solid like anything else in the physical world. It was over 2 meters tall, very toned and muscular like those Egyptian god images. He was all black with green silvers. His eyes were huge and protruding like a frog. They were all black and had a white slit, no nose bridge, just nostrils, no lips, no hair, a very round, nicely shaped head. He could almost be considered hot if not for his ugly mug. He oozed evil energy. Once I realized what I was looking at and I stood up on my bed with my back almost against the wall, screaming the whole time. My boyfriend who was downstairs awakes and has this nagging feeling that he needs to check on me. Never happens. So he just happened to walk in the exact time I started screaming. He said that he didn't see any lizard. During this episode, my senses were different. My boyfriend was yelling at me to calm down, but it sounded like he was in a far away or muffled. Also, my perception of time did not match the time in the physical plane for my boyfriend, because I started screaming while he was still coming downstairs, but he only heard me start to scream when he opened the door. My vision was different as well, because I could alternate between the lateral and frontal view of the room. I could distinctly tell that he could read my mind, because once I stood up, I told myself, I can't believe this. Don't tell me he's going to stretch out his arms like a zombie. Weird thought to have, I know. And he immediately did exactly that. At that moment, his image started to flicker as I was getting a bad TV transmission. He then lunged at me, and I saw his ugly face hissing right in front of me with his pointy teeth, and he tried to claw me at lightning speed. Then he went right past me through the wall and disappeared. I believe his energy crossed with mine, because I felt like I was burning up immediately after. At that moment, I managed to turn on my bed light and saw my boyfriend at the foot of my bed saying, "It's only me." He thought I was screaming because he frightened me. My dog was sleeping under my bed and was scared to death from my screaming. Another thing I wanted to point out, the day or afternoon before this particular experience, I asked my spirit guide to communicate with me in a way that had left no doubt in my mind of the content of the message. Do you think my spirit guide was responsible for this? Or do you think that the reptilian read my mind and was trying to take advantage of that to trick me into thinking that he was my spirit guide? Anyways, after that I had a long month, but I won't make this thread any longer than it already is. Any similar experience out there so we can trade notes? Hi, so I'll just jump in. I'm retired military, so I sleep really light. My husband is an ex-military and a cop, and he sleeps really heavily. I usually sleep alone, but my husband was off duty and in bed next to me. I woke up in the middle of the night on my back staring up at the ceiling. I then turned to the left side and saw a being. It's hard to say alien because I am still coming to terms with it. I look it straight in his eyes and push myself back from it towards my husband. It was reaching towards me with both arms. I was looking at the eyes the whole time. Then I was knocked out and woke up again on my back. I never really believed in aliens until this happened. Its eyes just amazed me that they were black but had that sheen to make them look like bug eyes. That color sheen. Also, I could remember that I was not scared, just startled. Also, there was a clock that is a motion sensor and it turns on when something moves in front of it, and I noticed it was on and I could see the glow. There was also a whitish glow in the room. I told my husband, but he insists that it was a dream, but I knew that I was awake. I'm just having a hard time coming to terms with it. Has anyone ever had something similar happen to them? Yes, this happened to me. Your astral body was likely separated from your physical body, thus allowing you to see interdimensionally. This happens to me frequently, and I wake up on the ceiling or I step out of bed, go outside and start floating or flying. In this state, which feels like complete reality and is real, a person can enter other dimensions. Sometimes this occurs by going into some kind of wormhole or some kind of portal. Sometimes you just seem to slip out into other dimensions. Anyways, I woke up once and a gray alien was standing over me. He was about 2.5 or 3 feet tall with a little spacesuit on. His head was huge compared to his body with large eyes. And another time, an alien that was about 5.7 feet tall, a little taller than me, was laying beside me. His head's proportionate to his body, eyes were round, and there was a crest on top of his head and a crest on each side. He seemed a little afraid of me and seemed surprised that I was looking up at him. A woman's voice behind me said, "Don't be afraid." I touched him and blue electricity shot through his body to the point of my hand. It didn't hurt, I could just see it. On other occasions, I've woken up in spaceships and in rooms with reptilian type aliens. Anyways, don't be afraid, just try to communicate with them. If you wake up like this again, try to get up and move around. You may feel you can float and fly. Try this when you wake up from the dreams as well. It's taken a few months to wrap my head around this. I was abducted on October 15, 2013 at approximately 2:10 a.m. I awoke at approximately 2 a.m. and walked into my kitchen to get some water. I am a light sleeper, courtesy of my husband who snores heavily. I walked by my sleeping and snoring husband. He was on the couch in the living room. The incident started when I walked back into my bedroom, got back into bed, and saw at least 5 orange orbs coming towards my home. I live in a rural area on 10 acres. I was paralyzed. I could not scream or move. During the time, I seemingly paralyzed, and the beings communicated with me telepathically. They told me that they were not here to hurt me, only to gather information. This was not spoken in English, no words were used, but I sensed the meaning in my head. The orange lights entered my home, almost strobe-like. My body was flung through my bedroom's sliding glass door. It was locked. I remember going through the glass sliding door and about 6 feet above. At that point, I blacked out and awoke 4 hours later in my bed. There were small puncture marks on my ankles. I could smell something metallic. I was in shock for weeks. Notably, I was taken during my ovulation. Menstruation was about 10 days late the following month. I had strange pregnancy dreams in the weeks afterwards. These dreams included taking a pregnancy test. Instead of the test showing a plus or minus sign, the entire stick just turned black. The dreams were subjective, of course. However, I was wide awake when the orbs came. I'm still having difficulty processing this. Alien life has never been a subject of my thoughts to dwell on, although this experience has changed my thought process drastically. I would like to hear from anyone who has had similar experiences. I'd also like to know if hypnotherapy provided some closure, or is the recollection of memories and details during the abduction only added anxiety. Notably, I am well educated, a mother of 2, substance-free, and has no history of mental illness. I am mentally prepared to face whatever happened and simply move on with my life. I was abducted by aliens. I am now 24 years old and have not looked into the case seriously until now. When I was 13 years old, I remember going to bed like normally and being in a deep sleep. I remember my dream vividly as well. I was dreaming of flying through the daytime sky. Moments later, I saw an owl's eye in the sky as well as in front of me. At the same time the eye appeared, a very loud, piercing ringing noise happened as well. I then woke up in a panic and continued to hear the loud ringing noise that was in my dream. My whole room was lit up a bright blue color, and I heard 2 or 3 conversations going on in my room that I did not understand. I was sleeping on my side facing the window, and my head was laying on one pillow, while the other was laying on top of my head, so I could not see what was going on. I then tried to move to see who was in my room and what was going on. That's when I realized my whole body, except for my eyes, was unable to move. I was panicking, knowing something strange was going on, and I could not do anything about it. I also noticed that I could not scream or talk or were able to sit up, and the lights disappeared, moving into an upward and outward motion as if heading towards the sky. The people in my room disappeared. My blinds were closed, but the bright lights was bright enough to where I could make out the movements. I was so scared and in shock that I could not believe or understand what was going on. I calmed myself enough to go back to sleep. The same events happened twice that night. The same dream, same bright light illuminating my room, and the weird conversations going on. The second time of occurrence is when I decided to sleep in my parents' room. I researched a little bit online and seen a comments after effect on the bed to see if there was hot pink stains on the sheets. Of course, when I decided to look on my bed, there were drops of hot pink color on my sheets. I haven't really done much research besides when the events happened, but that was the scariest night of my life. But the one thing I do notice is while going under streetlights, at the exact moment of passing under the light will turn off. I often feel paranoid at nighttime when in late hours thinking events will occur again. Since then, whatever happened in my room when I was 13 has not happened again. I hope it never does. It was 2008. I was at my friend's house relaxing and having only a couple of beers. Around midnight, we went to sleep and I crashed in his room and he took the couch. At some point in the night, I was suddenly woken up by the strangest feeling. Much like the buzzing of when your phone vibrates, my entire body, mainly from my chest, felt like that, so intensely that it woke me up. I looked to my right, and right beside my bed was a childlike figure in a bluish color only a meter away. I asked it directly, "Who are you?" And there was no verbal response. Rather, in my head, in my own voice, I got a reply, "Don't worry. Go back to sleep." Not wanting to anger this being or whatever it was, I played by his rules and tried to ignore it. But I was beyond that because I was alarmed at the situation. I then noticed two things. One being that even if I closed my eyes, I could still see the being in my room, and secondly, that vibrating feeling happened whenever I made a step around my room. My friend also had a dog which was 14 years old, blind, deaf, and with bone problems. It started barking and playing with this child for nearly 15 minutes. After some time, the thing left, and I remained awake for several hours, astonished at what just happened. At first, I thought I'd seen a ghost or something, and I did not even believe my own stories I told my friend in the morning. It sounded like lies coming out of my mouth, even to this day. But it definitely happened. It's an unforgettable experience. So that's my first story. It was 2011. I was soaking up rays in my backyard and listening to relaxing music. I started thinking about how a friend of mine was talking about inducing an outer body experience by meditation, and I decided to give it a shot. I realized it rid my mind of all noise and cleared my thoughts down to just focusing on my breathing. This took a good hour and a bit, and eventually I tuned out of my own breathing as well. When this happened, I projected my mind out of my body and began to float above myself, clear as anything. Lying on my front, I could see some spots on my back that I've never seen before. I saw my glass of water next to my head and my iPhone. Also, there was this rainbow-colored rope coming from the center and attached to the middle of my back. I began rising into the clouds, and I noticed that the clouds were not clouds at all, but millions of souls, all moving around and everywhere around me. I proceeded to rise higher, though, through various beautiful levels, and finally arrived at the top or highest point reachable. At this point, I was now face up on my back as if I were lying on top of an operating table. I saw 4 tall white figures standing over me, looking down at me. Their body shape was that of a classical-looking alien, only much thinner and much taller. One of them held a white cube, roughly 15 by 15 by 15 centimeters, and then placed it on my chest. Then instantly, I was transported straight back down into my body where I came to, and again was in disbelief of what I'd seen. After that, I fell into a great and lasting depression and was shortly after diagnosed with bipolar disorder, never having any history of bipolar in my past or in my family history. So that's the end of my story. If anyone can explain or share some knowledge or similar experience with me, that would be amazing. Thanks for reading. Looking forward to any responses. Note, I was not under the influence of drugs with respect to these stories. All legit. Thanks. I'm 18 now. Things are still going on. And this first started with my first experience when I was 7 years old. I'm a fairly normal, obedient kid. I would go in when the bell rang. I never wandered off. I had lots of friends, etc. Normal. When I was 7 years old, I was at recess. The bell rang and everyone went into their classes. I didn't. I stayed on the playground and stared at this very odd creature. I started walking towards it. All of a sudden, 6 triangle-shaped lights, the brightest lights I'd ever seen. It was moving in an opposite direction. I was going in the wrong direction towards the being. I'm assuming at this point the lights were guiding me to the correct direction, seeing I was going to the wrong way. I followed the lights and the lights moved and pointed directly at this being. As I stepped closer, I noticed it started moving. I stopped in my tracks and just stared. I was fairly around 10 feet to 13 feet away from it, so I got a great look at it. It was about 3 to 4 feet tall with skinny, long arms. Now, contrary to what many believe, it did not have those large oval eyes that they are somewhat notorious for. The eyes were maybe 3 times as large as normal human beings. The eyes were white. Now, I couldn't make out the rest of the face's features, I assume because they were quite faint and small. The eyes seemed to have moved, like it was looking straight into me, as if reading my mind. The eyes looked as if they were trying to focus. Next, it blinked, and it put its head down, and then it disappeared. That experience was on May 6th. If I had access to a computer, I'm sure I would have recorded it, but I was only 7. One day before my 8th birthday, I was too excited to sleep that night. I was the only child at the time, and I had my own room, of course. I had the front room with a window looking directly out of the sky. I had always been memorized with the stars, so when I couldn't sleep, I'd look out and stare. This night, I saw this very oblique-looking shape in the sky. It started moving into a circle. The stars were moving into another circle around this thing. I wasn't scared as far as I could remember. I wasn't even feeling anything, not even excitement. I stared intently on the shape. It started to take a color, a silver color, but it was almost reflecting off the night sky, taking on a blackish color. Red light started to blink on it, and then it just disappeared. My next encounter was years away. I was 14 and my mother had my little sister, and she just turned 4 that year. This was July. My sister would always draw spaceships and alien-like creatures. Instead of drawing other childish things, she'd draw that. My mother got so concerned with it, she took her to a child behavior psychologist. The psychologist protested to everything, saying it was a phase, an overactive imagination, blah blah blah, disputing everything. So my mom never took her back. I noticed her drawing got better with time. One in particular actually was exactly like what I saw October 18th when I was 8. Described further up. I was stunned. I never talked to her about it. How did she know what I saw? 3 years later, I was 17. My sister was 7. My sister stayed in my room most nights, complaining that there were creatures in her room trying to take her. My mom ignored it. I didn't. I knew she was telling the truth. On May 6th, almost 10 years later, I see the figure I saw when I was 7. Maybe because my sister was 7, she was experiencing the same thing I did because of our identical age. She was calm. She squeezed my hand, but I think it was more of a "do you see this" type of squeeze. I stood there for a good 15 minutes. It was about 8 to 10 feet away. It was identical to what I saw. White eyes, everything the same. It even put its head down and looked up and blinked. And then it was gone. Eerily similar to what I saw. I still have horrific nightmares and some odd dreams. Weird things happen, and my sister is now almost 9, and she now paints her drawings into more lifelike paintings of the night sky with spaceships and aliens and all that. I will post more about more experience because I will definitely have some. Thanks for reading. I will tell this story to the best of our recollections, but please keep in mind that our memories were tampered with, making this somewhat difficult and at times confusing. The actual date of this incident is also a bit uncertain. Our family lived in Sharon Springs, New York in 1994 to 1995. My husband was an iron worker and I was the manager of a cardiopulmonary department at a small community hospital. We had 3 daughters ages 13, 14, and 15 who attended the local public school. We were a normal middle-class family living in a normal home. We never had a conversation about UFOs or aliens other than watching Alf, The Last Starfighter, or Enemy Mine. We had not been subjected to any discussion, nor did we have any beliefs of any kinds in regards to the subject at hand. Friday, the 26th of May, my husband arrived home from a job in Massachusetts. Dinner was normally on the table between 5 and 6 p.m. I cannot tell you if we actually ate dinner that evening or if we just ate later than normal. I do know that the table was set and the food served, and the darkness had settled in. I will begin with what I personally recall. We were a bit scattered throughout the house. Someone was in the kitchen, one of the girls may have been heading down the stairs to the basement, and my husband was in the living room. He was the first to see the lights and yelled to everyone, "Hey you guys, come in here and check out these lights." "What is that?" At this point, we all gathered in the living room to look out the north-facing window, I believe with a bit of uncertainty, and then when I looked out the window, I saw 3 lights, or maybe my husband said there was 3 lights. My 14-year-old went to the south-facing window and said, "Nope, it's over here." She had no recollection of this, and we had no idea what she saw at that south window. Several things happened simultaneously, and what my perception was in slow motion. We were all close together except for my 14-year-old. I was beginning to feel afraid, and I reached my hand out for my daughter to join us at the north window. I turned my head to look at my husband, and he said, "They've come for me." I turned back to look at my daughter. That's when an extremely intense light that was brighter than any daylight filled the room. It was no longer coming from outside. My daughter reached out to take my hand, but she was still several feet away. The next memory any of us could recall was me saying, "We need to get this dinner table cleared off. Why is it taking so long? What time is it anyway?" The clock on the wall said 1 a.m. "Never mind, girls, just go to bed. It's way too late." I quickly cleared the table and we all went to bed. We got up the next morning like nothing ever happened. No one remembered anything, not until around 4 p.m. when my husband and I were just weeding the garden and he asked me if I remembered anything strange happening last night. I told him no and asked why. He said he wanted to know if I remembered seeing any lights in the sky. Then my memories came back to me in small bits and pieces. He said he couldn't tell if it was real or it was just a dream. Shortly after our somewhat vague recollections came back, we were approached by a neighbor that wanted to know if they saw all the lights in the sky last night. One of them had been a former military officer. He told us that he was going to make a few calls to see what was going on and why the military was sending helicopters over the house. There were a few military-style helicopters that were flying in a southerly direction that increased in numbers as the day progressed. This surveillance continued for several days. The neighbor made his phone calls. He was met with denial. The person he was speaking to last informed him that the government did not have any helicopters in that vicinity. His numbers was then blocked, leaving him unable to make any further inquiries. These helicopters were flying at treetop levels. We were able to clearly read the numbers off the underneath. They were definitely US military. My daughter's memories vary greatly about this incident. One of them believed it happened in a home we had in Maine, and one believed it happened in Summit, New York. My oldest daughter's memories is quite similar to my own, but we all remember the light inside the house and the late hour that the table had yet to be cleared off. We do not know if what happened next was pure coincidence or if this incident was a contributing factor. 5 days following this encounter, my husband died at work while connecting iron. To this day, we are all very angry and feel violated. We are all missing a minimum of 5 hours time frame, our memories tampered with and erased. We cannot tell you if this was done to us by our own government or by something beyond our world. You know, the world was supposed to end on December 21st, 2012, right? Well, it didn't, but something very interesting happened to me. Went to sleep that night, having been through the whole "the world is ending" scenario before, the new millennium, and had a very intense dream. It didn't feel like a dream, but something different. I saw a man who looked like he was from India, sort of testing me. Then I saw a woman who also looked Indian. They both were taller than the average person and possessed very perfect features that looked almost too perfect to be human. Taking pictures of me with an invisible piece of glass. You could see the outline of a square piece, but it was also invisible, which, if that makes sense. Then there was all this chaos going on in a society outside. People were revolting, partying recklessly in the streets, smashing bottles as if all hell had broken loose. And at that time, a ship that was shaped like a dragon, that was also on fire, pulled into a harbor. And as that happened, a UFO came overhead. A blue beam came down and sucked me up. With this, the intuitive knowing came that I was being evacuated out of a chaotic society and taken elsewhere to safety. I could actually physically feel myself being lifted within these dream states, and it was similar to how you go over a bump in the road too fast and your stomach feels like it rises up into your throat. Who was in the UFO driving but the man and woman I saw earlier, and they sort of gave off the feelings to me through telepathy, feelings of love and protection. I was placed into a holding room, and every time when attempting to leave, I could see and feel a force field pushing me back into it. That's all I remembered, but it was very odd and very real. After that, I picked up a book a few weeks later at the bookstore that mentioned things I saw in the dream, and that book itself led to all these other synchronistic overlapping things that got my life into a more positive place. I had another experience like that a few months later, and this time, while being sucked up into the ship, a voice told me through telepathy, you don't physically hear it, but it's through energy or something like that, that's better to plant your feet than to drift among stars, which I took as a message to say that despite these bizarre experiences, the most growth would come from everyday human experiences rather than having your head in the clouds or being fixated on the unknown. That was my interpretation anyways. I was never interested in aliens before this or studied it. And those images aren't actually anything I've ever seen before. So it's very peculiar experiences to have on that day, especially where all these prophecies from ancient civilizations were to have centered around. I'd love to hear feedback or ideas or similar stories. Thanks for reading.